All right, so I want to take you way, way, way back in time, all the way back to 2018. So long ago. Try to remember what it felt like in 2018 when we all just thought, like, this is the worst it's gonna get. I know it's hard to think that way, but just try to remember what that felt like. So in October of 2018, two events converged for me. The first was that I was invited to and was going to perform at the National Storytelling Festival in Jonesborough, Tennessee for the very first time. Woo! It's a huge festival. This was a huge opportunity. I was so excited. The other thing was a little bit less exciting. The week leading up to my performance in Jonesborough was the week of Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation hearing. And I don't know Brett Kavanaugh personally, but I took his confirmation hearing personally. I was raped in my 20s by a coworker, and I didn't tell anybody about it at the time. I didn't talk about it for 20 years. So let me just say, I believe the women. And watching that confirmation hearing was bringing up so much stuff for me, not just the rape, but all of those years of crap that we women have to put up with just for being a woman. The discrimination and the harassment and the catcalling and the stalking and all of the freaking mansplaining. Am I right? I mean, at this point in my career, I had been telling stories for 12 years. I had been teaching for 7 years, and before the week leading up to Jonesborough, I taught a workshop. And there was one guy in the workshop, and yeah, he held his hand up to me, and not to comment, not to ask questions, but to re-explain everything I had just said to the other students. So watching that confirmation hearing, I was getting so angry. And yet, at the end of that week, I had the biggest performance of my life. And I was having trouble focusing. So I knew what I needed to do. I needed to take that anger, and I needed to take Brett Kavanaugh and just put him in a box and stash him to the back of my brain. Maybe some of you here tonight know what that feels like, because I needed to focus. And that's what I did. I focused, I practiced, I was prepared, and at the end of that week, I drove down to Jonesborough, Tennessee with my kids and my husband, and I arrived at the Storyteller Hotel. They don't actually call it that, but that's the hotel in Jonesborough that if you are performing in the festival, you get to stay with all the other storytellers. And I walked into the lobby, and there were all these famous storytellers just lounging around, smoking cigarillos, drinking brandy out of snifters, right? That's what it's totally like that. And yeah, a lot of them were men, a lot of them were older white guys, but I was there. I was in the room, and all I had to do to prove that I belonged there was to kill it the next night when I took the stage. Yeah. So that night, I didn't sleep at all. And then the next day, I just rehearsed that story. I'd rehearsed 1 million times, about 1 million more times. And yes, I might have also gone to the bathroom a few hundred times. And then that night, the night of my performance, I stepped out onto the stage in front of 1,200 people. I stepped up to the microphone, and y'all, I killed it. Yeah. I was amazing. I told this very funny story. It was funny about how I got scuba certified when I'm really the last person in the world who should have gotten scuba certified, but I did it for love. And it was a funny story, but there was a lesson in it, you know? It felt so good when I was done. The applause just washed over me. I just floated off the stage into the little holding area. And then at the end of the performance, of the whole performance, I couldn't get out of the tent because people kept coming up to me and saying, "You were amazing, you were awesome, I loved your story," which, by the way, feels great, so feel free. And the men in the audience were coming up to me and saying that was great. But the women in the audience were coming up to me and saying, that was an important story. You should share that story at universities, at high schools. Young women need to hear that story. And I thought, yes, sister, I am with you. We have to stick together. And I just floated back to the hotel. That night I just floated over the bed. I was in this bubble of success. And in the morning, my kids got up and they wanted breakfast, and Bart, my husband, he wanted to take a shower, so he stayed in the room, and the kids ran ahead of me down the stairs, and I just floated down the stairs, heading towards the dining area, and we got to the dining area, and the kids ran ahead of me, and I ran into Ed. Ed is a storyteller. I didn't know him at the time, but he's a storyteller. You see at Jonesborough a lot, and Ed held his hand up to me. And I thought, all right, go on. Tell me how amazing I was. But Ed, he said, I saw your performance last night, and I wanted to let you know that I have some notes for you. Yeah. And that bubble just, and I just crashed down to the ground. Because here was a man stopping me. He was about to tell me what it was that I didn't do well when I knew I had done it well. And right around that time, there was some screaming from the dining area. The kids had apparently started a food fight with the two Bills, and Ed was like, maybe you should go deal with your children. And I was like, yeah, let me go be a mom. And I just kind of pushed past him into the dining room because now I was angry again. And I went in there and I grabbed the kids by the scruff of their neck and I shoved them into some chairs, and I went and I made them some waffles, and I made myself one, and I just sat there just trying to kill that waffle, you know? And I couldn't get this feeling out of my head. I was just angry. And while I was trying to figure out how to process this, the room went silent. And if you've ever been in a room filled with storytellers, you know that does not happen. And I looked up from my dead waffle, and all eyes in the room were on the TV hanging behind me, where Brett Kavanaugh had just been confirmed. And I couldn't look at him. So I turned away and I looked at the person sitting at the table across from me. And it was Ed. And he shook his head and just mouthed, "I'm sorry." I didn't want to look at him either, so I went back to just trying to really, really kill those waffles this time. And I knew I wasn't going to be able to enjoy this weekend, this amazing weekend, if I didn't deal with all of this anger. And around that time, my husband got to the table, and I knew I couldn't deal with that, but I could deal with that. So I handed the kids off to my husband, and I got up, and I walked up to Ed, and I said, "Let's have that talk." And he said, "Oh, no, you can finish breakfast with your kids." And I said, "No, let's do it now." And Ed got up, and we walked over to a quiet little corner, and I kid you not, he took out a notepad and started flipping through pages. He had pages of notes for me. And we've all been here before, sitting across from a man who was about to tell you how to do a job you already know how to do. And I knew I had to be professional and courteous, so I bit my lip. And Ed flipped to the first page and he said, your appearance. And I was like, really? You're going to start with that? Okay, let's go there. And he said, the dress and the jacket and the shoes, you were dressed so professionally. You really honored the audience with your clothes. And I was like, all right, well, I guess that's an appropriate thing to say. So I said, thanks. And then he flipped to the next page and he said, and your performance. And I was like, I know I had that audience eating out of the palm of my hand. Come on. But I just bit my lip. I didn't say anything. And he said, you're funny. I'm like, yeah, I know. And he was like, you have a great sense of timing, and you were really good about not stepping on the laughter, and yet you led us on this roller coaster ride. By the end, you had that audience eating out of your hand. And I was like, yeah, I did. So I said, thanks. And then he flipped to the next page, and he said, and your story. And I had ran that story past hundreds of people to get every last possible change made to make it absolutely perfect. So I was really interested in what he was going to say about this. And he said, it was a funny story on one hand. I mean, we were laughing along with you. But on another hand, it was a deeper story too. It was a story about surviving an abusive relationship. And at the end, when you walked out, you let the audience know that not only were you okay in that moment, but that you're okay now. And that's a really important message. And I thought, how did he get that? And I said, thanks. And then he said, that story, especially because it's funny, it's an important story. You should tell that story at colleges and high schools, because young women and young men need to hear that story. I hadn't thought of it that way at all. I thought I was just talking to the women. And I said, thanks. And then Ed stood up. And I stood up so fast I almost knocked over the chair. And I said, wait. And he said, yes. And I said, well, what about the butt? And he said, I don't think I understand. And I said, you said you have notes for me. I am waiting for you to tell me what you think I did wrong. And he said, oh, I'm so sorry if that's what you think. I just wanted to tell you that I really enjoyed your performance. And then he held out his hand. And I took it. And he said, welcome to Jonesborough. And that anger was just gone. And the rest of the weekend was wonderful. And in the years since, I've come to find out, that some of you know this already, that Ed giving notes to the exchange place tellers is a tradition. He does it for everyone. And he and I have actually become really good friends. And he has heard this story. And he had some notes for me. But they were wonderful. And in the years since, I have to say, I have occasionally found myself angry. Even when I had to prepare for an event, I found myself walking into a new space with anger in my heart. And sometimes when I walk into a new space, there is a man there who holds up his hand. And when that happens, I try to remember Ed. And I try to remember that sometimes when men hold up their hands, it is simply to say welcome. And I want to say thank you to Ed And to all the men over the years who have held out their hands in welcome and in support and in love. Please, please keep holding out your hand and helping women and LGBTQ and the less fortunate, because we need you and all of your manly privilege now more than ever. Thank you.